It was one of the UK's most famous paranormal shows, a series that promised chills, haunted locations, and unforgettable encounters with the unknown. Most Haunted drew millions of viewers and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. Led by Yvette Fielding, her husband Carl Beatty, and their team of mediums and investigators. To fans, it felt raw, unfiltered, and real. Late-night vigils inside crumbling castles and asylums where spirits supposedly roamed. But behind the jump scares and flickering lights, a darker story unfolded. Whispers of fakery, editing tricks, and staged possessions plagued the show for years. Former crew members spoke out, revealing how sounds were manufactured, how mediums were fed false information, and how drama mattered more than truth. What was once Britain's most trusted ghost show slowly collapsed under the weight of its own deception. This is the tragic downfall of Most Haunted and the cast who built it. Stick around, because the ghosts weren't the scariest part of this story, and don't forget to subscribe before we begin. When Most Haunted first aired on Living TV in May 2002, it quickly became one of Britain's most talked-about paranormal programs. At the helm was Yvette Fielding, already a familiar face to audiences from her years as a children's TV presenter. Alongside her husband, producer Carl Beatty, the pair launched Antics Productions with the goal of bringing a new kind of ghost hunting series to the small screen. Instead of scripted drama or fictional horror, Most Haunted would present itself as an unfiltered investigation into some of the UK's darkest locations. The format was simple but effective. Each episode saw Yvette and her team, psychic mediums, investigators, and parapsychologists, lock themselves into castles, prisons, and crumbling manors said to be haunted. Armed with night vision cameras and audio recorders, they invited viewers to watch as strange bumps, ghostly moans, and shadowy figures supposedly unfolded in real time. The immediacy of the format was its secret weapon. Unlike heavily edited horror shows, Most Haunted leaned on the atmosphere of live vigils and the unpredictability of the night. Audiences were hooked. Within months, Most Haunted became Living TV's most successful program, pulling in millions of viewers. Its popularity exploded further through live specials, especially their marathon Halloween events, where fans tuned in for hours of ghostly suspense. For many, it felt like the first real paranormal series, a chance to peer into haunted Britain without filters. But while fans were glued to their screens, skeptics already sensed cracks. Was everything truly happening as it seemed? Could a team really encounter such constant paranormal activity in every location? The show's success brought fame, but it also brought scrutiny. And as the seasons rolled on, those questions would grow louder until they began to consume the show itself. Of all the personalities to emerge from Most Haunted, none became more famous or more controversial than psychic medium Derek Acora. From the very beginning, Derek was the show's beating heart. He claimed to channel spirits through his guide, Sam, delivering dramatic possessions and vivid stories of ghosts who supposedly lingered in Britain's ruins. His flamboyant style and intense performances made him a fan favorite, transforming the show from eerie silence into shocking spectacle. Derek's possessions became must-see television. In darkened rooms, he would suddenly shudder, his voice changing as he claimed to embody long-dead spirits. Viewers were riveted. To his supporters, he was living proof of the afterlife. To his critics, he was a performer, leaning on theatrics rather than genuine ability. But one thing was undeniable. He made Most Haunted a cultural phenomenon. By the mid-2000s, Derek was one of the UK's best-known psychics. Newspapers ran features on his appearances, fans lined up for his live shows, and his name became inseparable from Most Haunted. Yet his rise also marked a shift in the program's tone. What began as a grounded exploration of haunted places increasingly revolved around Derek's encounters. The drama grew louder, the possessions more extreme, and the show more theatrical. Behind the scenes, not everyone was convinced. Some crew members and investigators whispered doubts, wondering if Derek's dramatic revelations were too convenient. How could he know so much about locations he claimed to have no prior knowledge of? Was it possible he had outside information? Or worse, was he deliberately faking his connections? For a time, those doubts were brushed aside, drowned out by the ratings his performances witnesses brought, but eventually, Derek Acorah's rise would set the stage for the show's biggest scandal, the moment that would forever taint Most Haunted's legacy. To balance the theatrics of mediums and investigators, Most Haunted introduced parapsychologist Dr. Ciaran O'Keefe. Unlike Derek Acorah, O'Keefe wasn't there to summon spirits or dramatize possessions. His job was to act as the voice of reason, the scientific skeptic who could offer natural explanations for strange events. On paper, it was a brilliant addition. His presence gave the show a sense of credibility, a suggestion that investigations weren't entirely driven by belief but had a grounding in science. At first, O'Keefe filled that role with caution and professionalism. He pointed out environmental factors like drafts, old plumbing, and creaking woodwork that might explain supposed paranormal activity. His rational interjections made the show appear balanced. Believers got their ghost stories, while skeptics felt their questions were being asked on camera. Yet, as the seasons rolled on, O'Keefe became increasingly uneasy with what he was witnessing behind the scene. The problem wasn't just the constant stream of supposed hauntings, it was how those events seemed to align a little too perfectly with the demands of television. Strange noises happened at the right moments. Dramatic possessions occurred just as the cameras were rolling. For a trained parapsychologist, it all looked less like genuine supernatural encounters and more like stagecraft. O'Keefe began to suspect that some of the mediums, and Derek Acorah in particular, were not being truthful. He worried that viewers were being misled, sold entertainment disguised as evidence. And while he could raise small doubts on screen, the bigger questions about authenticity were quietly ignored by producers. By 2005, he decided the only way to test his suspicions was to create an experiment so bold it could no longer be brushed aside. What came next would be the moment that exposed the cracks in Most Haunted's foundation for the world to see. In what would become one of the most infamous moments in paranormal TV history, Dr. Ciaran O'Keefe set a trap for Derek Acorah. During an investigation at Bodmin Jail, he fabricated the name of a fictional spirit, Creed Kafer, an anagram of Derek Faker. He quietly introduced the name into conversations behind the scene, waiting to see if Derek would take the bait. When filming began, the results stunned even O'Keefe. Derek dramatically claimed to sense the presence of Creed Kafer. He described details of the supposed spirit, acting as though he were genuinely channeling a long-dead jailer. For O'Keefe, it was the proof he needed. Derek wasn't channeling ghosts. He was repeating information fed to him, information that in this case was entirely fictional. The scandal didn't end there. O'Keefe ran further experiments, inventing names like Rick Edels, an anagram of Derek Lies, and planting fabricated stories about locations. Each time, Derek incorporated the false information into his performances. What had once looked like undeniable evidence of the supernatural now looked like simple showmanship. News of the Creed Kafer incident spread quickly. Newspapers picked it up, skeptics pounced, and Most Haunted's credibility began to collapse. For fans, it was devastating. The show that had captivated millions with its promise of raw, unscripted encounters was suddenly exposed as manipulative. And for Derek Acorah, the scandal marked the beginning of the end. Though he denied wrongdoing, claiming he was genuine and devoted his life to mediumship, the damage was irreversible. His reputation never fully recovered, and his relationship with Most Haunted soured beyond repair. By 2005, Derek was gone from the show. Officially, he left to pursue his own career. But behind the scenes, it was clear his presence had become a liability. The Creed Kafer scandal wasn't just an embarrassment. It was the moment Most Haunted lost the trust of its audience. From then on, every thump, shadow, and moan was viewed with suspicion. The show's greatest weapon, credibility, had been destroyed from within. After Derek's fall from grace, the cracks in Most Haunted widened further. It wasn't just skeptics outside the show who raised concerns. Former crew members began to speak out about what they had witnessed behind the scenes. Cameramen, sound technicians, and even anonymous staff described a working environment where creating activity often mattered more than documenting reality. Julian Clegg, a cameraman who worked with the show in its early years, admitted in a 2005 interview that he had been told to throw stones or subtly manipulate objects to create the illusion of paranormal disturbances. For him, it was never about authentic ghost hunting. It was about good television. We were constantly encouraged courage to enhance the action, he confessed, explaining that audiences expected thrills and producers wanted to deliver. Other accounts painted a similar picture. Jason Carl, a sound technician from the original crew, described how ordinary noises, creaking wood, shifting pipes, gusts of wind, were amplified in post-production to sound sinister. Whispers that might have been the shuffle of a coat became chilling voices. The faint scuff of shoes could be edited into phantom footsteps. In the end, natural occurrences were twisted into something eerie, all in service of suspense. There were even accusations of direct fakery by on-screen talent. Edited footage suggested that presenter Yvette Fielding and Carl Beatty, her husband and the show's producer, sometimes staged events themselves. In one leaked clip, Carl was seen pushing an unsuspecting sound man in the dark before passing it off as a poltergeist attack. In another, crew members forgot they were on camera and revealed cues that suggested noises were planned rather than spontaneous. For many loyal fans, these revelations were crushing. They had tuned in expecting raw truth, not staged drama. And for those inside the crew who still cared about credibility, it created an impossible choice: play along with the fakery or risk being pushed out. One whistleblower later admitted they left the show because they couldn't, in good conscience, continue misleading the public. It was a damning indictment, and it revealed that the rot inside Most Haunted ran far deeper than Derek Acorah alone. As the years went on, the scrutiny shifted squarely onto Yvette Fielding and Carl Beatty. Once praised for bringing paranormal investigations into mainstream entertainment, they now found themselves accused of orchestrating the very fakery that discredited the show. Carl, in particular, was repeatedly linked to suspicious incidents. Viewers noticed patterns. Stones thrown from nowhere often seemed to originate near him, and unexplained bangs coincided with his movements. His reputation grew so notorious that fans nicknamed cameraman Stuart Torrevell, Yvette's brother-in-law, Stuart Pebbles, for allegedly throwing rocks during investigations. But while Stuart bore some of the ridicule, Carl became the focal point of anger. The controversies peaked during their infamous live events. One especially damning moment came at 30 East Drive, one of the UK's most notorious haunted houses. Broadcast live in 2015, the event featured what was supposed to be violent poltergeist activity. But eagle-eyed viewers noticed a rope-like cable tied around Carl as he was suddenly yanked backwards up a staircase. Critics argued that it was a staged stunt, using a harness rather than genuine supernatural force. Worse, damage was later reported to the banister, suggesting deliberate tampering. Instead of admitting fault, Carl attempted to dismiss viewers as the lunatic fringe, claiming they misunderstood the equipment used in the live broadcast. But his explanation backfired. Fans compared footage, noting that all other cables on the show appeared black in night vision, yet the mysterious rope attached to Carl appeared white. The inconsistencies only fueled accusations that the pull had been fake. For Yvette, defending her husband meant defending the show's credibility. In interviews, she flatly denied any wrongdoing, insisting there was no acting and that every moment captured was authentic. But each scandal chipped away at the audience's trust. What once seemed like a groundbreaking investigation now looked like a circus. The public wasn't just questioning the ghosts anymore, they were questioning Yvette and Carl themselves. For two people who had built their careers on being the face of the paranormal, it was a devastating reversal. The couple who once symbolized belief now symbolized doubt, and the reputation of Most Haunted was dragged down with them. In the early 2000s, Most Haunted thrived in a world where viewers had little way to question what they saw on TV. But by the 2000s, the internet had changed everything. Social media platforms, YouTube, and forums gave skeptics and fans the ability to pause, rewind, and dissect episodes frame by frame. What once passed as chilling evidence was now being slowed down, zoomed in, and debunked in real time. Clips began circulating online, showing suspicious hand movements, awkward glances between cast members, and objects moving only when someone conveniently stepped out of frame. The supposed poltergeist attacks were scrutinized, with viewers pointing out fishing line-like cables, staged noises, and deliberate camera angles. Within hours of live events airing, breakdown videos exposed the tricks, turning what was meant to be terrifying into unintentional comedy. The infamous 30 East Drive incident became a lightning rod for this scrutiny. Footage of Carl Beatty being dragged backward up the stairs was replayed endlessly on YouTube, with skeptics highlighting the suspicious white cable looped around his waist. To many, it was the final proof they needed that Most Haunted was staging its events. Forums lit up with accusations, and former fans expressed outrage that they had been played for fools. Yvette and Carl's defenses only made matters worse. Their dismissals of critics as lunatic fringe felt arrogant, especially when the evidence was being pulled apart in front of millions online. Instead of restoring trust, their responses alienated even the loyal fan base who had once defended them. The show that had dominated Britain's paranormal television now became a punchline. Memes mocked Derek Acorah's dramatic possessions. Clips of Carl's stunts circulated as examples of bad acting. And Yvette, once admired as a groundbreaking presenter, was accused of knowingly fronting a fraud. The internet stripped away the veil of mystery, and once the illusion was gone, there was no going back. By the mid-2000s, Most Haunted was no longer the cultural juggernaut it had once been. Though it limped on with new episodes, its reputation was permanently damaged. For the cast, the fallout was devastating. Derek Acorah, once the show's brightest star, never recovered from the Creed Kafer scandal. Though he went on to star in other programs, his credibility remained shattered, and his name was forever linked to accusations of fakery. His later career felt like a shadow of his glory days, defined more by controversy than by triumph. For Yvette Fielding and Carl Beatty, the criticism was relentless. They remained defiant, insisting to the end that the show was real. But their reputations in the paranormal community never fully healed. To believers, they had turned ghost hunting into theater. To skeptics, they had confirmed every suspicion about the genre being built on smoke and mirrors. And to their critics, they became symbols of how far a show would go to keep ratings alive. Even loyal crew members weren't spared. Stuart Torrevell, once a fan favorite, was mocked for being Stuart Pebbles, accused of throwing stones to create false activity. His image as a serious investigator was replaced with that of a stagehand in a haunted pantomime. The sense of trust between cast and audience had been broken, and none of them would ever escape the stain of those accusations. Yet, despite all the scandals, Most Haunted left an undeniable mark. It inspired countless paranormal teams, influenced shows like Ghost Adventures and TAPS, and introduced ghost hunting to mainstream television in the UK. But its legacy is bittersweet. For every fan who remembers it fondly, there are others who see it as a cautionary tale, a reminder that entertainment often takes precedence over truth. The ghosts may have been fake, but the downfall was very real. Most Haunted was a phenomenon, then a scandal, and finally a tragedy for its cast. They set out to prove the existence of spirits, but in the end, the only thing they proved was how easy it is to deceive an audience. In the end, Most Haunted became a victim of its own success. What began as an ambitious attempt to document the paranormal slowly crumbled under the weight of its own theatrics. The more audiences demanded scares, the more the show seemed to lean on manufactured drama. And once the facade cracked, there was no way back. Derek Acorah's dramatic possessions, once thrilling, became infamous examples of fakery after the Creed Kafer scandal. Carl Beatty's questionable stunts, from thrown stones to suspicious rope pulls, turned him into a lightning rod for ridicule. Yvette Fielding, once respected as a pioneering presenter, was left defending a brand that many now associated with deception rather than discovery. Even crew members like Stuart Torrevell, who gave years of loyalty to the show, were branded with nicknames that mocked their integrity. The tragedy of Most Haunted isn't just the scandals or the accusations, it's how much potential was lost. For a brief time, it felt like the UK had a genuine cultural phenomenon, a series that could have reshaped how the world looked at paranormal investigations. Instead, it collapsed into a cautionary tale, where greed for ratings and a refusal to admit mistakes turned believers into skeptics. and fans into critics. Yet its shadow still lingers. Newer paranormal shows, from Ghost Adventures to Paranormal Lockdown, borrowed heavily from its format. You can see its fingerprints across an entire genre, but its legacy will always be double-edged, remembered both for igniting a passion for ghost hunting and for betraying the trust of millions who wanted to believe. In the end, the most haunting part of Most Haunted wasn't the ghosts on screen. It was the downfall of the cast themselves. Tragic reminders that when you fake the supernatural for too long, the real spirit that dies is credibility.